guess what? Daniel here with the Virtual Robotics Studio, and we are ready for the next video. This video, we're going to be doing all of the stops on this robot. So there are different ways to constrain the motion and the end stops of the arm. And to do that, we're going to need some of this stuff. So we'll be using some of this steel cable. And these are the ferrules that kind of clamp on the cable to stop it from moving. We've got some of these badge clips, which we're actually going to use just because when the arm is in certain positions, some of the ropes will get pretty loose, and we don't want them to get tangled on anything inside the robot. So these actually will like stretch out and come back in to help hold those pieces in position. And in fact, they'll be attached to the turnbuckles here, or near the turnbuckles. And so just like when we were doing the chain with those inline chain tensioners, we have these things that you can unscrew or screw in to tighten or loosen our rope stops. So if you tie it and it's close to the right length, these are going to let us dial it in perfectly. Then to attach a lot of this stuff to the robot, we're going to be using these U-bolts. And I know we went to Home Depot, we found a couple different types. There was the number 304 and number 308. It looks like number 304 is a little bit shorter, and that I think is going to work better on most of the places on the robot, but the 308 will work if that's all you can find. We've also got some of this Dyneema cable. We got it from Andy Mark. We tried paracord, and I think the paracord broke at times. So using just paracord for the stops might be a little bit too weak, so this is some stronger rope that we can use. And then we've got some of this latex tubing that we're going to use to help counterbalance the arm and hold it in its extended and retracted positions. All right, that is, I think, most of the parts we need for this build, so we're going to get these moved out of the way. But of course, before we start, I want to give a special thanks to Argosy and Everybot. All right, so we brought the robot back over. I'm going to slide it up to the table. The gripper is facing away from the camera, away from the table. So we're going to slide this in. And our first U-bolt is going to go into this top crossbeam. And it's going to go right into this surface. So if you look, right, we attached the hinge underneath here. And this one is going to go up from the hinge where it's attached onto the box here. And really, we just want this in the center of our robot. So let's measure across the robot here. And I've got 20 and 5/8 all the way across. So if we do half of 20 and 5/8, that's going to be 10 and 5/16. So let's go ahead and we'll make a mark at 10 and 5/16 here. All right, so we're measuring all the way across to see how big our robot is. And I'm measuring from the outside of this plate to the outside of this plate because that's an easy place to put my tape measure. And if I go all the way across, I get 20 and 5/8 inches. So we want to make a mark in the center of the robot. And if we divide 20 and 5/8 in half, well, it's going to be 10. And then if we divide 5/8 in half, that is going to be 5/16, which is like 1/4 plus a 16th. So we're going to go to 10 and 1/4 plus a 16th. So somewhere right around there should be the center of the robot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to verify that, because anytime you're dividing a number in half, it's really easy to make a mistake. So from this direction, right, I'm 10 and 1/4 plus a 16th. If I flip the tape measure around, I'm going to measure from this side. And we are going to get 10 and 1/4 plus a 16th. So that is the right spot. I am good to now mark from that spot to where I need to put the holes to drill this U-bolt in. And the U-bolt, let's find out how far apart the holes on the U-bolt are. And you can do it a couple different ways. You can try to just eyeball it so that you're measuring to the middle of each of these posts. And that's probably close enough. There is another trick with calipers, though, and that is if I measure one of these posts here, I can actually use the 0 button on the calipers. So now I'm accounting for the entire width of one of these posts, of one of these screws, which means if I measure to the outside but remove the distance of one of these screws, it's like I have one screw left, which is half on each side. So this is actually a very accurate measurement of the distance between them, which is 1.21 inches. All right, now, after you do that, make sure, and this is why I always kind of close my calipers to make sure they're 0 before I do any measuring. because I'm still on that other 0. So make sure you go back and zero it out again. So you're back to 0, 0 when it's closed. But now we know 1.21 inches is what we're looking for. And 1.21, if I divide that by 2, it's going to be 0.65. So that is what I'm going to set my calipers to, 0.65 inches. And what I can do is if I kind of set it on, well, actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and go to 0.5 so we can get our midline where we want to drill this hole. So if we do 0.5, we can sort of put a line on here. I want to not lose my center line, which is right there. All right, so I can scribe a 0.5 line here. And that is the center of the beam up and down, because our beam is 1 inch. So we're going to drill on that line. And then from this middle line, we're going to do that 0.65, which is half of the distance between the two U-bolts. So we'll go to 0.65. And if you kind of put this on the center point here, what you can do is just sort of rock it around. You can kind of curve it around like this. And where they cross, that's going to be one side. And then we'll do the same thing for the other side. So get the same pivot point and just kind of rotate that one around. All right, and so now I have the marks for where I want to drill. And I'll just check this really quickly. I'm going to eyeball it, make sure it's about 1.2. Looks like I might be a little bit too far. So we'll aim just inside of my 2 marks. So let's do the snap punch. And get that one started. Okay, and then down here for this one. Oop. All right, perfect. And the size of this bolt is 0.24, 0.23, which means theoretically a 1/4 inch hole is going to be good enough. I think we might end up making it a little bit bigger, but we'll see. We'll start with a 1/4 inch drill bit. And we are just going to drill through here. We want to try to drill as straight as possible through these holes. All right, and after I go through the first one, I'm going to take my time, get it lined up. Wow. Are we getting anywhere? Yeah, we're getting somewhere. All right, keep going. Okay. And then we'll do the other one as well. Switch over to this side. Okay, and let's do a quick check. Do the holes line up? They are close. I'm a little bit far apart. So I'll be able to force this in if I wanted to, but just doesn't seem worth the effort. So let's get this out. And then we'll be able to, I think we'll drill this up to the next size, if we can get it out. There we go. So I'm going to move up to, from my 1/4 inch, I'm going to move up to, this is 5/16. And if yours slides through perfectly at 1/4 inch, you're probably okay to just leave it. But let's go ahead and open these up. And I think I'm going to end up drilling all the way through, but let's see how the back holes line up. So let me take the nuts off here really quick. And then we can start. Yeah, we want to go all the way through. So I'll go ahead and drill through the second wall now. On both of those. And then that's good. That goes through nice and cleanly. And the hole's not too big. It's still going to be able to pinch down. So we're going to be in OK shape for what we needed to do. All right, I do have some burrs on these holes, though, so let's clean them out. And same thing on the other side. OK. Now we're ready to put our U-bolt in for real. So take off the plate and the nuts and just drop the U-bolt through the holes. Then on the other side, we're going to take the plate and slide it back up. Let me go ahead and turn this. Okay, so the plate is going to go up here. And then just screw on the nuts one at a time. Okay, and then you'll need a 7/16 wrench. And with the 7/16 wrench, we can, this way, just sort of tighten them down. And you want to do them a little bit on each side at a time. So we're trying to keep the amount of thread that's sticking out the same on both sides. Okay, and that feels pretty tight. We still have room on the top to attach stuff. So we should be all set on this U-bolt. Let's move on to our next one. So our next one, you can see this surface that this U-bolt is on. If we come down the arms that are here, and we've got these two T's, that is where our next U-bolt is going to be attached. So we left these holes empty a while ago. And those two holes are where we're going to attach our U-bolt. So it's the same process. We can try it. Let's try to see how it goes with a 1/4 inch hole. I think on this one, we're probably going to want to do a 5/16 hole again, but we'll start with a 1/4. And so if you go back on the arm, remember we skipped those bottom two holes. So those are both empty. We're going to drill through the plate and one wall of the box and then stop because our hinge is on the other side. And so we'll just drill through. Okay, and then I will clean the holes up, but we might drill again, so I'm not going to get too picky with it. And we'll see if they go. So these do not line up particularly well on this one. One thing that you might see is that the U-bolt, this U-bolt, it's bent out a little bit. So that's making it a little bit harder to put in. So I think we're going to do a couple things. We're going to switch to the 5/16 drill bit first. And we'll open this hole up a little bit. Okay. I don't know that we want to open it too much more than that, so we're going to try to make it work now. So still doesn't quite line up. So the next thing we want to do is we actually want to crush this down to flatten it a little bit. So the vise is usually a good item for that. So I'm going to just put this down into my vise. The trick here is, and sometimes it works better this way, you need to get it pretty flat in there. And I'm just going to tighten the vise up, and you can see it's bending it in. And I'm going to go a little bit past where I think I want it, because when I loosen up, it's going to spring back a bit. And let's see, that is now pretty good. I think we can work with that. Okay, so it still gets a little tight at the end, but I think enough of it is going through that we're going to be okay. All right, now, for this one, we have a little bit of an extra trick here. And that is, we need to be able to tighten this after going through only one wall of this box, which means we need to put a nut on the inside, but it's going to be really hard to tighten that all the way down on the inside. So what we're actually going to do is just get nuts started on the inside, but we're going to tighten it down with nuts from the top. That means we need 2 sets of nuts. So go ahead and take this U-bolt, screw this nut all the way on till it's up at the very top. Okay, then the plate's going to go on. And then we need 2 more of these 1/4-20 nuts to be able to go on the inside. So when we're done, this is going to be on the inside. And as long as we can get it started, we'll be able to then use the top one to tighten it down. So this is probably, this is tricky. This is a little bit tricky. But essentially what you're going to have to do is put this on a finger, balance it on your finger, and reach in. And you'll be able to kind of see it in the hole from above. And if you're, well, I need that part. All right. And the idea is when I'm in the hole and it's on the end of the screw here, of the U-bolt, I'm going to just try to turn my finger a little bit to get it started. And if you can kind of get it started spinning just a little bit with your finger, pushing against it, then you should be able to reach in and tighten it a little bit. I mean, we just need to get some of the screw poking out the bottom. So it's going to be a little bit tricky to reach in there and do that. I guess if your hands are really small, you can go in that way. But we have to get it to spin inside there just a little bit. So I'm now on this back screw. I'm just trying to get it started here. Okay, so it is now bit on. So I'm just sort of like wiggling my finger back and forth to try to just tighten it slowly, a little bit at a time. And I can feel now that the U-bolt is now poking out below the nut. And so that's good. I'll make it so that it pokes out just a little bit. And then we're going to do the front one. The front one's a little bit easier because you can kind of see it, and you don't have to reach in quite as far. I don't know if we can tip this up enough to really see in there, but we'll try. And so on this one, I can just kind of get my thumb to help start spinning it. So this one's much easier. And when that one's going, there we go. So now they're both a little bit past the bottom of the threads, which is where we want them to be. And so now all we have to do is tighten the top ones down. So I'll spin those so they go down until they're in the plate. And a little bit tight. And you might want to try to get it, you might want to try to screw the ones on the inside in a little bit more so this U-bolt sits down just a tiny bit more. Because we don't really need it to be super tall here, but at some point it's not worth tightening the inside ones anymore. So that seems like a good spot. So we'll tighten those down. And then once again, the 7/16 wrench. And you shouldn't even need to have anything on the inside. It should just sort of tighten down. So that's in there nice and tight. And we got to do the same thing now on the other side. So I'm going to go straight to the 5/16 drill bit because we know that works. So switch sides over here. Okay. And the inside for this is not too bad for me, but if you do this and the inside holes have a lot of burrs on it, that might make it hard to get your bolt started. So usually the side of the file also has some teeth. So you can come in kind of with the side of the file and work on that until it's a little bit flat. And then let's deburr the top as well. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing. Take everything off. Tighten the nuts all the way up to the top. Put the plate on. And then we've got our 2 extra nuts that we have to get on the inside. And I'm going to slide my finger in until it's kind of in position. And there's just a little bit of the ability. Oh, actually, before we do this, let's check to see if this one fits, right? It didn't fit yet. We got to bend this one in as well. So we'll go back over to the vise. And again, I'm going to go a little bit past where we think we want to be. And that should relax to about the right spot. Oh, looks like we want to bend it just a tiny bit more. Perfect. Okay. So then this plate goes all the way on. Start with the nut back here. If you're lucky, you might be able to kind of rotate this a little bit to get it to drop into the first hole. Mine did not. I think that's on. That is on. It's spinning now. All right. And again, I'll go until a bit of the screw is sticking out. And then same thing on this closer one, which is not as bad because my thumb actually can help. Okay, and then we'll tighten the top ones down. And then get that 7/16 wrench, and we'll tighten it the rest of the way. All right, that one looks good. On to our next one. Now the next one, see, we're gonna have to come around here probably. So the next one is gonna attach to this post here. And it's actually gonna be attached on sort of the backside like this. And really, we just have to measure our distance down and mark our 2 holes and drill them. So let's see what we've got here. So this one is going to be 3 inches down if we measure on the long side of this diagonal support. Let me see. I think I'm going to get a clamp to hold that back there. so it's out of the way. So if we pull this all the way up, give us a little bit of space. All right, so from this corner here, going down on our bar, we want to basically be 3 inches, and 3 inches is to the top hole, the center of the top hole. So let's go ahead and measure this down to 3 inches. Sure that stays where we want to measure from. So this is 3 inches. So that is our first hole's location, but we also want to put it in the middle of this piece. So let's go ahead and we'll set the calipers to 0.5, and we'll kind of do our best to bring this out to the center. You could get a straight edge for this if you wanted to. All right, so we have that scribe mark. Actually, think maybe we can get 3 inches here with the calipers as well. Okay, this time I'm going to use the inside to inside. I think I can just barely get that to sit up there and come down and scribe our second mark. All right, so we've got a good plus sign where we want to drill our first hole. And then let's grab our U-bolt here. Our U-bolt is, again, this was what, 1.2? Well, this one's a little bit different, I think. So once again, I'm going to 0 on here and see what this one is. This one is 1.26, so that's what we're looking for. Go back to normal. Put this at 1.26. And then we'll get our mark down here. Okay, and then I'll go back to 0.5, so we're in the middle of the piece. And we'll do one more scribe mark there. All right, so we have now the 2 locations in theory where we're going to want to drill this. If we kind of look at it next to the U-bolt, that looks pretty close, especially if we bend the U-bolt in a little bit, which we'll probably end up having to do. And so that is where we want to drill these holes. Let's get the snap punch, and then we can drill them. I was a little bit low, so I'm snap punching up to kind of move my hole back up to where I want it to be. There we go. Let's get this bottom one. That looks pretty good. All right, and I guess we'll start with the 1/4 inch hole again, knowing that it's almost assuredly going to have to get opened up afterwards. But this way we have a chance to check, and we might be able to adjust our angle if we need to as well. Okay, we really want to be straight now when we drill this second bit in here. And you want to be straight to the angle of the bar. So I'm just going to try to make sure that this is as perpendicular as possible, and then from this direction it is running straight in as well. So this is something where you probably want to get another person to look at the other angle. So if you're behind it like this, you can kind of tell if you're straight this way, and then maybe you have another person to guide you on that angle. But we'll see how close I can get. Doesn't look terrible. All right, let's do the second hole, same thing. Let's see if our U-bolt will go through. So this one is going to be just like the way we built the first one up here. We don't have to put any nuts inside. We're done with that. We just need to get this U-bolt to drop all the way through all of the holes. And it is not. It's a little tight. The back ones are pretty lined up. It's pretty straight, but they're just a little too tight, these holes. So let's just go to the bigger size. Okay, so I'll just follow this all the way through. Okay, do a quick fitment check here. Perfect. All right, before I put this in though, I'm gonna deburr the holes. All right, so U-bolt goes through. And then on the other side is the plate. And then finally, we tighten the nuts on. Oh wait, time out, time out. This U-bolt goes from this side up towards us. So we actually want the rope to be tied on this side of this bar. So easier to drill from this side, but we got to remember the U-bolt should come up from the motor. You know, next to the motor, come up towards the front of the robot. Now we can tighten these on. All right. Let's get that wrench. And remember, tighten them a little bit on each one at a time until it feels pretty snug. All right. That one looks good. We're going to do the same thing now on the other side of our robot. Okay, so first step was we're going to be 3 inches down from the crack here. So my 3 inches is going to be about there. Let's color that area in. All right, so let's get a 3-inch scribe here. Okay, and then we need a 1/2-inch one. Okay, so we got our first mark. And then, again, I'll just check this U-bolt. Yeah, 1.2 something, 1.25 looks about right again. So we will go ahead now and sort of like transfer that line down. Just putting one tip of the calipers right on my first plus. And then we're just going to kind of wiggle them back and forth to get a little bit of a line. And then finally, we need our 0.5 in one more time. So there is our 0.5. Okay, so we have our second crossing point here. And I'm just going to kind of look across, and it looks the same. So I think that is reasonable enough for us to move on. It's always good to do like a sanity check, though. You spend all this time measuring stuff, and sometimes you just are off by something, or you measured from the wrong spot, or whatever. So it's always good to kind of like look and say, hey, is this right? And this looks right. So let's go ahead and drill. I guess we know we're going to need the 5/16, so let's just go straight to 5/16 here. All right, is it going to go? Looks good. Let's deburr. Clean the holes. Looks good. Get this tag off of here. And unscrew everything. Pass the U-bolt up from the back towards the front. Put the plate on. And then tighten the nuts in. And this one, it fit where I drilled it. I didn't have to bend it. But if yours doesn't go through, of course, go ahead and use the vise to bend it a little bit straighter. I guess if you really were in a situation where you had to bend it the other way, you could do that too, but you would have to use some pliers to do that. All right, that is in and secure. So that is all 5 of our U-bolts in and ready to go. Let me get this mess cleaned up, bring out our cables and our turnbuckles and our rope, and then we'll start adding our stops. Okay, the next piece that we're going to work on is this polycarbonate sheet here. And we noticed this a little bit before, but like when the arm goes into weird positions, you can get a lot of bend in this polycarbonate sheet. And actually, that bend, we're going to use that to help control the actual dimension of this, to constrain the dimension of this. And we're going to control the dimension of it by putting a bend into it by using some of this steel cable. So if you've got your steel cable, what we're going to do is we're going to fish that through those holes that we drilled yesterday in the last video, whenever that was. And basically what we do is go up from the bottom here, and we're going to be on top of the polycarbonate plate, right? If you stretch the arm out in front, we're going to be on top. And we're going to go all the way down to the second hinge here. And so this is why this position is not the best. Let me tip it back just a little bit to get that fed through. And then pop back up through the other hole on this side. And this one is going to pop up through that hole after I cut it. I guess I should have started there, but that's OK. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball how much space I might need here. So I'm going to come around the side. I'm going to measure this way more than I need, because we can always cut it shorter. And we're going to need extra in order to connect it to our turnbuckle. So I'm going to cut it somewhere around there. The best thing I found for cutting this is just some of these. I mean, these are diagonal cutters. I think I got these from Home Depot as well. But just line it up and squeeze hard. And they'll pop. And so now this can go up through this last hole. Right, and we have plenty of extra. Maybe I'll fish some more through to this side. And what we want to do is we want to attach our turnbuckle in the middle here. before we attach the turnbuckle, though, if you think about it, this turnbuckle, like in this position right now, we sort of have no tension in the plate. Our cable is nice and loose going all the way around. So we want our turnbuckle to basically be unscrewed all the way. And if you remember, one side of the turnbuckle is going to be a normal thread, so right goes in or clockwise goes in. And this one actually says it on it, so this is cool. It has an R and an L, so I know this is the right-hand thread, which is the standard thread, and the other one is the left-hand thread. But what we want to do is unscrew these almost all the way, because we think once this is connected, we're only going to want to make it tighter and tighter and tighter. So I'm going to bring this out till I got a couple threads before the end of the turnbuckle here. And then the other one, I'm going to do the same thing, but remembering that it is the opposite thread, so we have to spin it in the opposite direction. Okay, and I feel like I'm going to go in a couple from where I was. There we go. So I can see, if I look in here, I can see 3 threads on each side, 3 to 4 threads on each side. And this is going to just rest right here. And we kind of want to get this centered, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So what we're going to do is take and pass the cable through one of the eyelets. And the idea behind this is we're going to end up bringing this cable together and pinching a ferrule on it down here. And that's going to end up what locks it in place. Okay, so if you get your pack of, I think these are 1/16 ferrules, because that's the size of the cable. Also, this little bit on the end, this is like heat shrink or something. This is here to stop the cable from fraying open. You got to take that off or it won't fit into the ferrule. And what we do is there's sort of, if you look really, really closely at this ferrule, there are 2 holes in there. They're kind of touching each other, but there are 2 holes side by side. And so this is going to go into one of the holes, and then it's going to loop around and come back into the other hole. So, all right, so what we're going to do is start this onto the piece that we had. We're going to slide it through the eye of our turnbuckle. And then we're going to pass this back through the other end so that we have a loop on top, and the tail, or the tag here, is coming out towards where the wire came up from our hinge down on the bottom. And I am not a steel cable expert, so I don't know whether we really want to be pushing this up nice and close or whether we want to leave more space on our ferrule, on our space around our turnbuckle. But we're just going to go with something that feels kind of comfortable. I'm going to adjust this loop until this turnbuckle feels like it's about in the middle of my plate here, of my polycarbonate sheet. So this feels pretty good. And I would say I don't want to go super tight because I don't think I want to have a tight bend on the top here. So I'm kind of sliding this up until I feel it starts to get a little bit tight, and I'll back up just a little bit, and that feels like a good spot to me. Now, in order to lock this on and keep the cable from moving, we have to crush this aluminum bit down. And there are a few different ways you can do it, but really you just want the biggest pliers you can find. And if you just put that in there and squeeze as hard as you can, it will hopefully crush it down. And they do make specific crimpers for this. I don't have them. The other thing you can use is if you have vice grips, because these have kind of the extra length. It gives you a little bit of extra leverage. So with these, I can also squeeze, and if I got it set in the right spot, we'll kind of pop in. And if you're doing it with the vice grips, after it pops in the first time, I would turn it just a tiny bit, tighten it just a tiny bit, and then do it again. And then I'll do that, turn it tiny bit, and try it one more time. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull kind of as hard as I can on these cables. And if they slide, it's not crimped tight enough. If you can't get them to slide, it's probably OK for what we are doing here. All right, so that is one side in. Let's do the other side now. So once again, we're going to pass it through the eye of the turnbuckle, get another ferrule, and run that down on one side here. That ferrule goes through the turnbuckle as well. And then I'm going to pass the other side through the other hole in the ferrule. Right? And I'm going to pull on this one. I'm not going to tug on this so that things are flexing and bending, because right now we're set up to only tighten on these, so I don't want to make it too tight right now. So I'm just going to, there's still some slack in here. I'm not trying to fight it. I'm just trying to get everything into position. I'll slide this forward a little bit until it gets tight, back it up just a tiny bit. And then I will grab my vice grips. I like the vice grips for this. And we'll squeeze it down. Okay. And that is not tight enough, so we'll turn it a little bit more. Do it again. Now we're getting somewhere. Turn it a little bit more. Do it again. Okay, that's about it. And now we'll do that tug test again. It is not sliding at all. And we don't want to have any of this tension in here. If we have some tension in there, we might be able to fix that. But we're going to have to adjust where we start these turnbuckles. All right. Then the next step is going to be to tighten this in. And you can tell as I tighten this turnbuckle, and it helps to kind of hold both ends. And if you need another person to come in and spin the middle, that is the best way to get this to go. But you can see I'm going to way over tighten this. I'm going to tighten this a lot. You can see as I'm tightening this, what we're doing is we're putting a pretty pronounced bend into our polycarbonate sheet. And that's what we want to be able to do. Now, we're looking for our sheet to be bent enough so that the dimension from the pin on the bottom of this hinge, this piano hinge, to the pin on the top piano hinge is 23 inches. So I'm going to line this up on the top one here, come down to the bottom one, and what you can see right now is I'm at 23 and, 3/16, which means we need to get these two closer together, which means we need to tighten the turnbuckle. So I'm going to turn the turnbuckle a few times. And that should have brought it back up a little bit. Also, I'm going to loosen the arm up here so that we have this. I think it's going to be better if I don't have it resting on the table for this step. So I'm going to kind of have it hanging down in this neutral position here. And let's go back and measure again from top hinge. And I'm going center of the hinge to center of the hinge. And right now, it looks to me like I am at 23 and a 16th. So I'm going to tighten this turnbuckle, tighten the turnbuckle. I loosened it. So I'll turn it back to where I think it was and then tighten it maybe a turn and a half. And we'll try again here. Very, very close to 23. I'm just going to give it one more half turn. All right, and make sure I keep the top in place. All right, one more half turn. It's looking very close, though. All right, one more full turn. That was too far. All right, back it off. A half a turn. And that is pretty darn close to 23. So this is now adjusted. Let me bring the arm back up so it's a little bit easier to see again. All right. And now we've got these long extra tails, and we kind of want to deal with that. So I think you can cut probably pretty close to the ferrule. And we're just going to cut the tail one off. And that's about as close as I can get, I think. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. And a lot of times these little wires can start to fray and open up. And it can just be a sharp point in the robot that you can scratch yourself with. So we could do heat shrink, but it's too late. We would have had to put it on before this step. But I like to use just some electrical tape, or really any tape you've got will be just fine. And the idea is I'm just going to go around that end just to keep it from being exposed. So now, instead of having the sharp end, right, we just have some electrical tape on there. Let's do the other one. That was probably more electrical tape than I needed, so we'll cut a little bit less this time. All right, there we go. Okay, so those are covered. We have this dimension set. All right, now our next step is going to be to set up our rope stops. I think we might need to move the table a little bit. So we're going to reconfigure stuff, and then we'll try to get our end stop set up. Okay, so our next step in tuning is there are going to be hard stops. That Dyneema cable that I talked about is going to go from here to here. And then on this side, same thing. It's going to go from this U-bolt back to this U-bolt. And you can see if this starts coming forward, eventually that rope is going to get tight, and it's going to stop, and it's not going to be able to move any farther forward. Actually, then, too, going the other way, eventually it's going to get tight from here to here, and it's going to stop and not be able to go any farther back. So the same rope is going to work as our out and in stops. But we have to tie the rope in kind of the exact right spot. We're going to use another turnbuckle, so we don't have to be perfect. But essentially the idea is we want to raise this arm up until the center of this front roller, this tippy-top roller here, is 50.75 inches off the ground and 39.75 inches back to the front plate of our robot chassis down here. So first of all, it's going to be really hard to hold this in place, so we're going to bring some help out in just a second. But I think it's also really hard to have two tape measures going at the same time. So we have kind of a plan for that, and that is we're going to use, we've got an extra piece of 1x2 box, but really any bit of metal that is at least 50.75 inches tall is going to work for you. And our thought is if we can get this clamp to the table here, we can put a mark right at 50.75, and then we can measure from the front of this box all the way down on the ground out to the front of the robot, set it in that position, and then we should be able to adjust our stops without having to just mess with tape measures the whole time. Unfortunately, if you have lots of extra people, one person's job could be to sit there and hold this. We don't have that many extra people. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to clamp another bar to it, clamp that to the table, and then we'll have this freestanding on our table over here. So I guess the first step is we'll get a clamp here. And I do want this to be square, although the way we're going to measure it, probably not the end of the world if it is not square, but that is pretty good right there. So I'll throw another clamp on here. And then I'm just going to move this kind of off to the side a little bit, so I'm not exactly in front of where the robot's going to be, and then we'll just clamp it down to the table here. So I'll try to keep this clamp as flat as possible. And on the table, it doesn't really matter. Actually, nothing matters except that we can measure the distance from the bottom, and we have a mark at 50.75 up on the top, on the front here. So I am going to measure up to 50.75. So 50 3/4 of an inch is like right here. So that is our mark. That is what we are targeting. And what I'll do is I'm going to bring that all the way across on this edge, and I'll bring it all the way across on this edge. do it this way. And now we know that we can look at it from this direction, we can look at it from that direction. We know we just got to get our roller to be right on that point. All right, so now I need help because the robot, first of all, be careful when you bring this arm out. We don't have the battery, we don't have the sort of belly pans or anything else in the robot, it is really close to tipping over until we add some more weight down at the bottom. So you got to be careful for that. That is another reason why you should have multiple people doing this. So anyway, bringing Jack back in. What's up, Jack?
Not much.
How you doing today?
Wait a minute. I'm doing well.
All right, so our goal is going to be to hold this up at the right point. But first, I think we measure on the floor. And we get that 39.75 to the bumper.
Yep.
Let's see. If you want to slide the robot over so that when it comes out, I guess we want the gripper when it comes out to be right kind of on the side of our, that looks like a perfect spot. And so we'll measure now from here out to 39.75. So that should be right about there. And a note for everybody, we're going to tune it this way. Then we're going to end up having to tune it again, and we'll probably end up having to tune it again. So you're going to have lots of practice tuning the robot. This is our initial setup. Then every field you go to might be a little bit different. So every field you go to, you're going to have to adjust your turnbuckles and dial it in for that specific spot. I think there's like usually a plus or minus quarter-inch tolerance on field elements, which means when you go to grab the cone, it could be at the exact height. It could be plus a quarter of an inch or minus a quarter of an inch from that height. So, all right, why don't you bring that out. And then, so I think should be right, we're aiming for somewhere right around here. But we've got to kind of get our rope started with our last turnbuckle. And this turnbuckle, I don't know, I think we don't really know whether from where we tie it, it's going to have to get looser or tighter. So I think the best bet is to maybe go halfway. So if you set that down for a second, and if you want to spin the middle, it should be faster if you spin the middle. And we're going to unloosen it until it's about halfway loose. Also, see what I did was that I never know which way is forwards and backwards on these, so I had Jack do it. So if he got it wrong, it would be on him. Looks about halfway. Yep, all right. So then, okay, let's orient everything. This turnbuckle is going to live kind of here. Okay, it does stay there. Then we're going to have our cable. And the cable is all one piece, is all two pieces. We're going to have two pieces of cable. Sorry, the steel cable is one piece. Our Dyneema cable is going to be in two pieces. And it's going to go from here. And it has to go all the way forward through this one into the turnbuckle here. But, of course, we have no idea what the dimension is. But right off the bat, what I can do is I can tie a piece on here. Then when we push it forward, we'll be able to sort of measure it and attach that piece. So I'm going to go ahead and tie a knot onto this back U-bolt here. And I am not in any way a knot expert. Not. Double negative. All right, no, I don't know the best knot for this. I am going to use something called a double Davy knot, which I feel like it's good and it's strong. But if you know knots better than me, go ahead and use the one that you think is best. If you want to know how to tie this knot, I think I'm going to tie it here, and then maybe we'll do an example tying on the table where it's a little bit easier to see. But essentially, you've got your tag, which is the end of the rope coming through, and the main rope. This should go underneath the main rope, and then down through the middle, and then towards the bottom of it. And then need a little bit more length on that. Then it's going to loop back up through the middle. So it's going to go over the bottom and then under the top. Then it's going to go over the top and under the bottom. And you get sort of this like squiggly shape. And then when you pull that tight, it locks down. And you can just tug on this one nice and tight. It will lock in. It's not going to loosen up. But actually, if you pull on the knot, you can get it to loosen up. So you can untie this by hand. But like where the stops are going to be tugging on this, it's not going to give. So anyway, that's a knot I like. And now we're ready to kind of tip this out. But I guess we can do one more demo of that knot tying, hopefully where it's really easy for you to see. All right, so we're going to feed this through whatever it is that we're tying it to, in this case, the turnbuckle. And we have the two ends that are coming out this way. So this end is the main rope. This is everything that's connected. And then this end is our tag, or the end of the rope that we're going to try to tie. And the first step is to bring this under the main rope, like this. And then it's going to wrap around the top of the main rope and go back through the middle. Then we're going to kind of thread it back through. So it's going to go over this bottom part of the loop down here, and then under this top part of the loop. And then we do the same thing back from the top. So now we're going to go over the top part of the loop, and then under the bottom part of the loop. And now we have this end here and this end here, and you just pull, and it will cinch itself down. Give it a nice tug, and then it'll cinch itself down to this nice compact knot. All right, so hopefully that made sense. If not, like I said, any knot is going to be fine. We'll go ahead and head back over to the robot. All right, so now we have to hold the arm in position. So Jack, if you want to drag that out, get it close. And remember, we have the turnbuckle, so hopefully, right, like we don't have to be perfect. And then this rope is going to come out through here. And then it's going to attach to the turnbuckle, and we're going to have to tighten it down to the turnbuckle. So we're going to want somewhere around here. And let me grab scissors so we can cut this. And a lighter. So let's see. We're going to leave ourselves plenty of extra, although we do want to make sure that, OK, so that would be halfway. So that's plenty extra, and the other side has even more extra. So we'll go to somewhere around here. Realistically, it feels like this 10-foot bit of rope is probably enough to be cut just exactly in half. And then you can trim the ends off later. All right, when you cut a lot of rope like this, the ends will start to fray and fall apart. And if you just melt it a little bit with a lighter, you can kind of get the end, and careful, it is hot, but usually I like to squish it together. You can kind of get the end to turn into just a little bit of a blob. That seems pretty good. Kind of squeeze it in. And that usually helps to keep it from unfurling. You can also put tape on it. All right, so we have our extra rope for the other side. And now this one, we need to tie onto. All right, and how close are we? A little bit down, a little bit, I don't know, somewhere around there. It looks pretty good. We're going to have to make some more adjustments, but that seems like the spot. So we're going to tie this on when that is about halfway across here. So we really want this to end up tied on right about there where it's hanging. So I'm going to do the same knot again and back through. One more time. Okay, so go up, and there we go, and then back down. Okay. Then we're going to pull on this one a bit, and then we'll have to pull on this one a bit. And we'll see how much that slid on me. Okay, so we went past halfway. Let me retie that one more time. So just know that this knot will slide down a little bit. So you got to kind of account for that. And it looks like it slid by about an inch. So let me, once again, kind of find the spot. Then I'm going to move it up by about an inch, and then we'll tie again. And that is not exactly the center, but it's pretty close. I think we'll be okay with that. Okay, and then get the other end of the rope here. I'm just going to tie this on the other side with the same knot, of course, because I only know 3 knots. Really, Jack? You're not interested in what 3 knots I know?
What 3 knots do you know?
Well, now I feel like that was prompted, and I don't know if I should actually share that information. I actually know 4 knots.
Oh, okay.
Because I learned the Davy knot today, the double Davy knot today or yesterday. I know the uni knot, I know the square knot, and I know the granny knot. I guess I know how to tie my shoes. Is that a knot? Does that count?
Maybe? I don't know. In this context, not really, but in other contexts, probably.
I see. I'll take it. All right, and we're going to run this rope so that it comes down to the inside of the box here. And I'm going to get it started on this back one here. You can see. All right, so we are getting pretty snug. And we can actually see where we are here. How does it look? Good distance, but we're a little high?
Yeah, it looks good distance-wise, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of that's what we're looking at. And one thing before I tie this, if you pull up on the arm, is it kind of stopping out there? That feels like it's, that feels like it's stopping out. Okay, so I want to try to get my knot about here. So we'll do our best to do that. It's going to be hard, a little bit harder to tie this. Actually, if you lower it just a little bit, and what I could do, although it is kind of, I could put a mark here where I want my knot to end up. But I'll kind of keep my finger there instead. All right, let's see how close that got.
We're a little bit past, but we're
Okay.
definitely more than in turnbuckle range.
Good, good. And I'm going to leave the extra length there. I'm not going to cut it until everything is working, because we can always untie that knot and make adjustments. All right, then our next step is, to think about what our next step is. So we have a couple different ways that we can adjust things. So the first way is, obviously, so if this is going out until it hits the stop, right? If we shorten the stop up, if I pull some of this rope back and we shorten the stop up, we stop sooner. So by shortening the rope, our end stop here, we can kind of determine how far out it goes, but also the shorter it gets, the lower it gets, right? So if we stop sooner and sooner, the arm is going to be lower and lower. If we stop later, it goes up higher. So that's one method that we can make adjustments. The second method is this cable here that's putting our bow in this, that will also change it. So when this is all the way out, if you think about it, if this piece here is longer, it's going to push this point forward and down. And if this point goes forward and down, the arm also goes forward and down. So we can also use this, and if we tighten this, it's going to pull this up and in, which will bring the arm up higher. So we have those 2 different turnbuckles that we can adjust. We have one more position to check, though. So when it comes back, so it's supposed to, this rope is supposed to be tight when it's all the way back too, and right now, instead, we are hitting on the arm itself as the backstop. So I think we figured out why that is, and that is all the way back at the beginning when we started doing this, these diagonal braces, these support pieces, were listed on the cut list at that point at 33.9 or something like that, and that was not the long side of the measurement, that was to the short side. So our pieces are actually shorter than they're supposed to be. Now, you have a couple of different ways to solve this. One is you could cut new pieces. These rivets, though, will have to come out, and the whole plate will have to slide forward. So that's a decent amount of work. I think, though, we may be able to solve this by adjusting some stuff. So the idea is when this comes out, we get all of the string nice and tight in about the right spot. We're going to have to make some adjustments, but it's close. When it comes back, it's not enough. So what we have to do is we have to increase the distance between here and here when it's back, and also at the same time decrease the distance between here and here when it's forward. And so I think if we flip these brackets around to the other side, that should do that for us, right? Because we're going to be moving forward away from that back position towards the front position. And it looked like this position should move about an inch. If this bar were in the right spot, that back thing would be about an inch further forward on the robot. So I think if we go from tying the knot just on this side of the box to tying it on just this side of the box, it's going to put us in about the right spot. So let's go ahead and we're going to take our U-bolts off. All right, and then we'll take the U-bolt out and bring it around to the other side. So we're going to put these in from the front now. And once again, I'm going to tighten both of them about evenly. I want to keep the bolts that are sticking through about the same length. All right, that looks good. So if you cut this piece to 33.9 like we did, we're going to try this solution and see how it works. I think it's going to work for us. If you cut yours to the right length, 34.5 I think it is, then just leave yours on the back and it should have already worked. And you'll be like, why are they messing with it? Mine is fine. So let's see how this looks when we bring it forward. I think now, because we moved it forward, our rope is going to be way the wrong length. So we'll just kind of put well, no, let's just readjust everything. All right, so we're back at 39.75 on the ground. And then go ahead and let's bring this out. Okay, and we know at this point we're way too far out, right? So I'm going to untie from here. I think it's easier for me to tie on these back U-bolts when the arm is being supported. And we will try to get this one a little bit tighter. All right, so if you want to lift it out and stop this time when we're at about the right spot. So that looks pretty close. Okay. You know what? We're going to have to retie both because I don't really want this to be right at the U-bolt. So I'll kind of retie this one when it's about here, which means I'll go a little bit too close, and then when we tie the knot, it'll slide back a little bit. Okay, that's pretty good, depending on, still in the right spot-ish?
Ish.
Okay, so this side is pretty good for it. Now we'll untie this side. Go ahead and slack the rope a little bit. Okay, we'll tie this side again. All right, and go back to position. So that is about right?
Yep.
Okay, give me a little bit more slack here. I'm going to do about an inch through, and then I will tie this. Okay, so pull that out. We're pretty close. We maybe need to go a little farther. Maybe not. Maybe that's perfect.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, and now go ahead and start passing it back in. And we're going to see if it gets tight on the inside on the rope. And it does. We are stopped on the rope. We have one last check, though, and that is if you grab one more piece of metal, we want to make sure that we're inside the frame perimeter in the front. We can't be sticking out past the front of the robot. So if we put something against the front of the robot, we'll see how much room we've got. So it looks like we got about, that's a good inch, maybe plus or minus a little. So I think that's working. As we tune this in the rest of the way, we should be able to have it work both ways. OK. Now, the next problem is this turnbuckle here just kind of flops around a lot. And we want to stop that from happening. And so that is what these badge clips are for. So on this U-bolt here, it's just a little carabiner, so just click them on. And I do one from one side and one from the other side. And then basically we can just stretch this down. And I think the idea is you put it on the rope right next to the turnbuckle here. We'll do that on both sides. So now, keep an eye on this turnbuckle, like it's kind of being supported. And as the arm moves out, it's going to stretch out those badge clips and pull the U-bolt down. And then when we go back, they'll sort of take up the slack. And then when we go back to this position, it'll again stretch back out so it's in a good spot. All right, so let's do our final adjustments now. We have to kind of get it to go the rest of the way where we want it to go. So if we bring this back out, the question is, how close are we? I would say we're slightly too far out. So if we, you know what? I don't know, that's pretty darn close.
That's pretty good.
And the height is, maybe the height is still just a tiny bit too high. So what we can do here is, because the distance out is good, but we're a little bit too high, if we tighten this up a little bit, that would pull it up. So if we loosen this a little bit, that will let it out just a little bit more. So if we do something like this on this turnbuckle, right? We made this longer, so that now brought it back down. Let this go down a little bit, and that, I mean, as far as I can tell, that's pretty much right on our mark. So I don't think we can do much better than that for right now. Again, we're going to have to tune this more in the future. Let's do one more check on the front to make sure we are still in frame perimeter here. Right? And this is going to run all the way up until that stop hits. So we'll be somewhere like this.
Ooh, even better.
We got more space?
I think
Perfect.
so, yeah.
OK. Yep, then I would say we are in good shape. We've got our badge clips assembled. Now there's one more thing that we can do to help this robot out, and that is there's this quirk of 4-bar linkages. There's this cool thing about 4-bar linkages, and that is if we attach stuff in the right way, we can have something that is pulling out on the arm when it's out and pulling back on the arm when it's back. So if you think about it, when the arm is out here, it's really heavy. And you could see us kind of struggling to keep this up and not tip the robot over right now. But if we could make it this point on the arm, this beam going across here, if we can make that point be pulled up towards our top crossbar here, you can see that because this is out in front of the crossbar, the direction that that would be pulling would be helping to support the arm and keep it up. But then, if we spin this back through to the back, once we go past center here, now, if you're pulling from this beam up to the top, you're not pulling the arm out anymore. Now you're pulling the arm up and in. So by adding some stretchy stuff, essentially rubber bands, we're going to use surgical tubing or latex tubing. By adding it from this beam to this beam, we're going to have the arm be supported in its two most important positions, which is all the way out, which is where we grab and score cones at, and all the way in, which is where you want to be when you're driving around the field or to start the match. So let's grab the surgical tubing. And there's no specific way to do this, except that we know it needs to be pretty tight. And so we're going to try to get in the ballpark of what it needs to be. And then we'll go from there. So this surgical tubing is going to go, I think it makes the most sense if I bring this arm out a little bit. So we're going to go around this big bar in the middle of the robot. And we want to watch out for where the other stuff is. So let's see, if we're on this side, like this, when it goes out, we're clear. And when it comes back in, yeah, I think we want to make sure that this, the turnbuckle, is on top of the surgical tubing in this position. And you can see right now, it is not holding it at all. So I'm guessing this needs to be very tight. So what I'm going to do, just for testing, is I'm going to stretch this just about as much as I can. And then I'm just going to put a knot in it. And let's see. I can tell that it's helping because it's easier to put the arm out, but it's not enough to hold it in either position. Oh, it is almost enough to hold it back, but it is not enough to hold it forward. So let's do another bit of surgical tubing on the other side. And right now, I'm not going to cut this quite yet. I want to just make sure that what we're doing is going to work. So I'll take the other end here. And we'll just have this extra bit going between them. But I'll pull this one just about as tight as I can. You can see the arm moving up when I do that, which is a good sign. And we'll pull this through. And a temporary knot. So when this is out all the way, does it hold itself? Not, it almost holds itself. Holds itself here. Very close. And on the way in, it is holding itself all the way in. So if anything, we want to go just a tiny bit tighter on these. That's almost as tight as I could go. But I think what I'm going to do now is I am going to mark here and here. That is the length of the belt of the loop. And here and kind of there is the length of that one. And then we'll go ahead and untie them if we can. There is the mark. There is now a lot of marks on this side. But I think we need a band that's about this size. That looks very short. We do have another option too, which is depending on what size surgical tubing you got. There's no law that says you can only have one band on each side. So we could add 2 bands on each side if they're looser. If you got like thicker wall surgical tubing, you'll need less and it won't be stretched out as much. So you're going to have to kind of adjust this for your robot specifically and the surgical tubing you got. But if you have the same stuff as me, let's see. It looks like I need about 22 inches, a 22-inch loop. And there are lots of ways to secure surgical tubing. The knots are OK, but the knots do tend to move on you over time. So one thing that we might try doing is adding some zip ties to hold it together. Now that is another thing that is going to be very hard for me to do by myself. So let me get the zip ties and let me get some help. I can't open the bag. There we go.
Kind of astonishing.
Sorry, electrical is coming soon.
Yeah.
All right. So take these zip ties and so I have, let me see, let me add a new mark. So I'm going to try to go, I'm going to leave myself a couple of inches of space. And then I think we said we needed about 20, where's the other mark? So I can measure it again. The other mark is completely gone. All right. So I'm going to say we want to mark, I'm going to make a new mark here, and I'm going to make a big mark. And then we said it was like 22, right? Yep. So we're going to do another mark over here. And then I will fish this through. around here. And we're going to pull this up. And I'm going to overlap them so the marks line up. And then we're going to try to zip tie these two together. I just need to get my hands shifted around. All right, there we go. And
like so?
yep. And then we just need that as tight as possible. And if you're worried, you can do more than 2. I'm going to do 2 on here. Looks like we slipped a little bit. That's okay, though.
That's why we got a second one.
I think it slipped when I was holding it. I don't think it slipped after you attached it. So that's on me. All right, so I don't think that's going to move. And that gives us something that we can work with now. So this was basically 22. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. I don't think we need this anymore. Is Everbuilt like the Home Depot brand?
I think so. I mean, pretty much everything that I put on an Everybot that comes from Home Depot is Everbuilt.
I never thought about it actually before, but yeah, it definitely seems like that's the case. All right, so here's our 0 on this one, and here is our 22 on this one.
I guess those door hinges weren't.
The door hinges weren't, but maybe the door hinges are an actual, or piano hinges. Maybe they're an actual, maybe they're an actual hinge company. All right, we're going to pass this through again. I want to go so that the rope is on the outside. And then we will, wait a minute. For our testing, just because I'm really trying not to cut it until I know what's up, I'm going to make sure that the extra loop is on the back so it doesn't get tangled on anything. Okay, okay. I'm going to go under the rope with the extra loop. And now we're good. All right. Gotcha. Okay, so there's the first mark, and the second mark is here. Okay, and I'm just trying to hold those 2 marks together while we zip tie it in place. All right, let's see how that looks. Not enough, but enough. All right, so let's try now to, we got a couple options. We could add another one, which would probably get it done for sure. Definitely can get it done with 3. Let's check as it goes in. That is all the way in. Okay, so we can get it done with 3. Should we try to do it with 2? I guess we'll try. We're going to make these tighter. We're approaching the limit of how tight we can make them, but we'll try taking a couple inches out. And I mean, I guess technically, I'll put on safety glasses in case things go flying. They should not go flying too much, but I'm holding both ends of the wrap, so it should not go crazy when I cut this one. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to now try, instead of 22 inches, oh, and that's stretched out now. That's more than 22 inches. We're going to try 20 inches. So this one. And that one. All right. Maybe. I think I could pull this.
Like 3.
I could pull this a little bit tighter, but it is starting to get hard, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's try this side. We'll shorten this side up, and then if that doesn't work, we will look to add our third one. So we're at 20 inches now. And I guess before we even attach that, we can sort of see if the arm will stay. That is just barely staying.
Wow.
So let's go just a little bit shorter. All right.
Yep. And notice how I never put my fingers underneath there? I always just let the zip tie do the work. Underneath.
Yep. If I let go, it would pinch. Okay, and I've done zip ties like this. It usually holds. If you're worried, you can add another one. Just make sure you get them as tight as you possibly can. All right, that is still just a bit short. This is good. And that's so close. It takes almost nothing to get that driven out the rest of the way. All right, so I think we've learned that we need both sides at what, like 19.5?
Yep.
And it should be good. So now we're gonna disassemble this. We're gonna do our final measurements. We're gonna cut them now, and we're gonna go for real. I like how even though I've done this 3 times now, and it never has gone flying, I still like flinched away when I cut the first one.
Yes, I'm definitely staying at a safe distance.
Ooh, all right. I think I did damage this one a little bit. So. All right. Where did our turnbuckle go, or our badge clip go? Ooh, that badge clip got a little. There we go. All better. All right. So now we are looking to actually make it the length that we want. So you still need a few inches on either side in order to be able to have something to hold on to when you stretch it out. So we'll go from, I'll leave a tail on one side. I'm going to make my mark at like, I guess 19. Make sure this is straight. I'm going to go just 19 and a quarter. Let's go 19 and a quarter. And then we can cut it on our first line, the 22 line. That looks like that's going to be enough. If you need a little bit more to hold on to, you can cut it a little bit farther. You can cut this with scissors. I just happen to be holding these, so I'll cut it with these clippers. And then we'll measure our second one out here. We've got our tail. There's the beginning. And then 19 and a quarter. And then we'll cut it over here at 22. All right, do you have fresh zip ties?
I do now.
We've got our little zip tie graveyard going on down here. All right, and so if you're following along, this is a good dimension to start with, but again, everybody's robot's going to be a little bit different. If you cut your shafts a little bit longer, your intake could be a little heavier than our intake, or it could be lighter than our intake, so you really have to kind of figure this out or adjust this based on your robot. There's the mark. There is the mark. All right, so those two marks together, and that's where we want to be. Also, if you stretch the rubber out a little bit where the zip ties are going, that also helps the zip tie kind of bite in deeper. When it slacks up, it sort of hugs the zip ties on the sides as well. And once that's set, and I think too, like once it's down here, it's a little bit easier, but you want to kind of be holding the zip tie up and pulling down and away, kind of like in that motion, but those are very tight. And our second one. I think I've written on myself more than, with the Sharpie, more than I've written on the tubing. All right. I forgot to hold on. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, find your marks, line them up, and that seems good. Seems a little off, but. All right, perfect. And you can move these zip ties to wherever. I think I like them kind of probably just off the edge here. Another thing to look out for when you're putting this surgical tubing on is if you're going over any sharp edges, so you want to feel around, especially these brackets that we're going through. If the edges are sharp, you definitely want to file those, smooth them down. If you need to, and it's still like not, I mean, if you notice that your surgical tubing is still getting cuts, you can do a few other things. You can cover that area with tape, or actually, I like using the fuzzy side of adhesive Velcro because it's a little bit thicker than tape, so it doesn't wear out, but it's still nice and soft for the surgical tubing to go on. The other thing I'll say about the surgical tubing is if you put this on at the middle of build season, whenever you get to this, by the time you get to your first event, if these were still on from that original time you put them on, they're going to be too loose. These will stretch out over time. You can see when I lift this up now, it's pretty good. That's pretty good. We might actually, I mean, we could have probably gone just a tiny bit tighter. All right, we'll adjust this one a tiny bit tighter. But essentially, they're going to loosen up over time. So what you want to do is, that's why I like kind of marking them like this, so that you know you can come back. And I could even put like, a big solid more mark here. You can detach them by cutting the zip ties. Then, when your robot's not being used, and then when you're about to use or test your robot, you can attach these. Or alternatively, you can leave them on, and when it's not strong enough anymore to hold it out, you can add a third band, the amount that you need, and then slowly tighten that third band over time in order to make it work. But it looks good on both ends. I do feel like I want it to pull up just a little bit more than this. That little bit that it sags down is bugging me. So let's just tighten this one end a little bit more. We do have one more piece of our frame, I guess our superstructure frame here, and that was that bot crossbeam, the bottom crossbeam. We made that so many videos ago. We didn't want to put it in yet because we wanted to make sure that we knew where our intake was going to be and where a cone in the intake is going to be. So when this intake grabs a cone like this, right, we want to make sure that when we put this beam in, it's not so high that the cone is going to hit on it. And it looks like, too, just where we are, we got a lot of extra room, so I think we're going to be okay putting this where the design tells us to put it. But there is one problem with my bot Crossbeam, and that is that it does not fit inside of my structure. So this is slightly too long. And what I'm going to do is, if I line this up so it's flat kind of on that side, like so, if I do a Sharpie mark here, I've got to kind of take it down until I get to the Sharpie mark for it to be able to fit in the robot. So you could that's maybe enough to be able to cut again. Or I'm going to use the grinder, and I'm just going to take that back down until it's flat. All right, this is now ground down and filed, and it does, in fact, fit in between the boxes just about perfectly. So I think we did a good job there. Now, we're also going to need some of these Rev 90-degree brackets. You're actually going to need a ton of them. We're going to need 8 total. So let me open up this last bag here and bring them over to the robot. We need a drill with a 3/16 drill bit because it is riveting time again, which at this point everybody should be experts at. We've put so many rivets in this robot. All right, grab some clamps, grab some rivets, and then we're going to grab the cone and a tape measure. Okay, and this crossbar, the bottom of the crossbar, is supposed to be 9.5 inches up from the bottom of this support brace, the O2 support here. So if we kind of measure this up, I'll measure on this side. So the bottom of it should be 9.5. So we'll move it up until it is 9.5. So right about there. And this is not going to be our final, like I'm not mounting it here yet, but the question is, if it's in this position and we grab a cone, can we clear that bottom support? So if the cone is rolled in and this comes in, that is pretty good. It doesn't hit it. We're clear of it. And actually, if the cone starts falling out, it kind of rests on it. And because we're kind of going up at this point, even if the cone is resting on it, as long as it doesn't get behind it, when we go up and out, it comes off. So this actually should help us keep the cone in our gripper while driving across the field to score it. So 9.5 inches looks perfect to me in this position. And we really wanted to double check that, especially since we found out that our supports ended up being a little short. That means our supports are actually tipped back a little more than they would have been. All right, so now we're going to actually mark that 9.5 inches up on our support beam and use that to start attaching our brackets. So we'll go up to 9.5, right about here. And what we're going to do is take our first bracket, and the bottom, basically the corner of the bracket should be on that mark. And with these brackets, again, I'm just going to keep it flat on the sides of the support. We've got that mark in the corner, so now we'll just get it clamped up, and then we can start drilling and riveting. because this is a 1 by 2 inch box coming through here, what we're actually going to do is take a second bracket and put it right above the first one. So this one is easy to locate because it's just going to sit flat on the one we just put in. I'm going to keep it flat on the sides of this support piece. And then once again, we're going to clamp it in and then drill and rivet. Okay, so our first two are in. Then we've got a few options here, but I think if we just attach our box going across, that should guide us to positioning the brackets on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and clamp the box in first. And I'm going to start out with it flat on those two plates, but we should check and see if it's square. That is pretty square when it is flush. So we'll go ahead and tighten this down. And one down here. All right, and one last thing before we continue is let's see if we're 9.5 inches on the other side. And that'll kind of double confirm that we are square and everything is good. And it looks like, yeah, it's maybe just a hair low, but we'll be able to adjust that when we get to that side. So we're going to drill and rivet all of these, except for these ones, because again, these ones are right on the seam between the two parts, and we don't want to drill into the wall of the box. All right, so all of our front side ones are in. We have 4 more angle brackets. We're going to basically line them up on the back and do everything a second time. Let's spin the robot around here. Now, the only thing that we're worried about, the only thing that might make this tricky is if the drill can't fit. But the drill fits no problem. So basically, everything we did on the front, we're doing on the back. Nothing's new, nothing's different. Line up each bracket, drill it, rivet it. You know how it works. All right, we are just about done with this, but we have a couple of loose ends to deal with. I guess literally loose ends. We've got the zip ties here. I already cut this side down, but I'm going to cut these ones down as well, because these could stick outside of your robot, making you illegal. They could maybe also get stuck in the chain. Just don't want to have stuff dangling around that could get you in trouble. I also really recommend a pair of flush cutters like this, where the blade is right on the back. So a lot of times when you cut these, if you don't get all the way down to the bottom, you end up with kind of this sharp point, which is definitely going to scratch you. So with the flush cutters, you can get right down next to the zip tie, the head end. There's nothing sticking out, so that's pretty good. If your surgical tubing is too long and you've got long pieces of that, you could trim that down with a pair of scissors. Remember to leave enough that you have stuff to hold on to when you're stretching it back on, right? So if you cut it to take it off and you're putting it back on, you still need those extra tags to be able to get it assembled. If these extra bits are still getting in trouble, you could get some small zip ties and just attach them on here to hold it in place. And also, we have some more loose ends, which is we never cut the rope. So we've got the ends of our ropes here that are kind of out in the way. And right now, once your robot is working and you've been practicing on it and you know it's good, you could probably cut this down a lot. We're going to leave this on here so that when we go to practice and we're trying to pick up stuff and score stuff, if we have to tune it again, we might need this extra rope. So for right now, my suggestion is down here on this channel, you can just kind of bundle it up like this. And on the outside, so it's away from everything that moves, you can just kind of put a zip tie around here to hold it in place out of the way. Same thing on this one. You can kind of just give it a little bundle and zip tie it on the outside like that. All right, but that is it. We have finished constraining our robot, adding all of our cables, belts, stops, U-bolts, all those pieces that we needed. So this robot is mechanically finished. Next step is going to be to wire it. So we're going to work on electrical in the next video. We'll see you there. But before we go, as always, special thanks to Argosy and Everybot.